Gunnar Bjursell, who's a medical doctor to start with, a professor emeritus, and who has created and launched the website whom I think and I hope that you all know of, the Cultural Brain, and you've gathered and collected important research there to be found for anyone interested. Yes. So, Gunnar Bjursell, you will lead this talk, but I can just present the names of the Elvira Brattico, Orselius-Dahl, Benny Marcel, there you are, it's very good, Max Liljefors, and Erik Sandøy. There, yes. Great. And one of you need my headset. I think it's you, Benny.
So, is mine on? Can you hear me? Yes. Perfect. So, I'm Gunnar Bjursell, and I'm going to lead this panel discussion. But before I start doing that, let me add a couple of points for more information. As you might have seen, we have a Center for Culture, Cognition and Health that has been formed at the Karolinska Institute. And we have a good contact with sort of other disciplines. And this has actually been done very much in line with the Kompetenscentrum at the Stockholm Council. And we have a folder that you can all take and have an example. And there are the boss and of this, the chairman of this center is Fredrik Ullén. He's sitting up there, waving his hand. And there is another person, also important person, that is the chairman of the Council for Cultural Affairs, Ingmar Ernberg. It's been all of you have been very instrumental in putting this together. It's interesting that when I talked with you, Rebecca, you said that you were basically a molecular biologist, and you see 3 molecular biologists here being important. And when I did this transformation about 15 years ago, it was because of obvious things, that healthcare is sort of now entering a new direction, and we need more tools in our toolbox. That's important. And je ne regrette rien. I don't regret what I did once upon a time. But it's going to be like this, that I ask the panel members here to have a short introduction of, say, 3 minutes, who you are, and we have sort of prepared a little bit of questions for you. But the main purpose is not to go through all the data again. We have seen a lot of data, but looking into the future. Why are we here, and what's the direction? What's the process we have ahead of us? So, please, Rebecca, can you start?
Certainly, yes. Hello, everybody. I think by now probably you know that I'm Rebecca Gordon-Nesbitt. I'm researcher to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Arts, Health and Wellbeing, which is co-chaired by Lord Howarth, who many of you will have heard speaking this morning. I was asked to say a few words from the researcher perspective because I researched and drafted the Creative Health Report. So specifically thinking about how one might reach a range of stakeholders with a project of this kind. And the stakeholders that were given to me were politicians, practitioners, healthcare professionals and researchers. So I would say that in order to reach all of those groups, you need to involve as many people as possible from the word go. So you heard this morning that we had these roundtable discussions that included representatives from all of these groups in very active and dynamic conversation. We also had an advisory group made up of representatives from these different categories. And one particular area of expertise that's missing from that particular list is service users and people with lived experience of ill health and poor well-being. And you heard from Lord Howarth that we were very keen to involve people who had that kind of experience to bring that to the table and describe it to us. And we feel that voice has to be heard. So I tried to weave that into the report as often as I could. Going forward, we've tried to find champions of arts and health work. So one of the 10 recommendations that we make in the report is aimed specifically at healthcare professionals and people within health trusts, within local authorities, in control of public health budgets, that kind of thing, to really come forward as champions to drive this work. in the right direction. So that's something that could perhaps be looked at here. I obviously don't know how your systems operate, but if you can identify key people that you think might be receptive, it often comes down to one individual who's really passionate about this kind of thing. We tried to present a range of methods in the report. I think that's interesting to mention because different people will respond to different kinds of evidence. So medical people might only relate to randomized controlled trials on a large scale. Other people might be a bit more receptive to qualitative evidence. We're trying to broaden the categories of what we can consider as evidence. So we're looking more towards qualitative research, smaller scale studies, testimonies, case studies, all of which will be rigorously sampled but involve the personal perspective a bit more rather than hard numbers. And finally, I think we need to change the language that we use to describe this kind of work in order to find some sort of common ground on which to communicate. So the key messages that Lord Howarth outlined this morning are framed very much in relation to healthcare people. It speaks to them in the language they can understand about saving money and so on. But eventually, what we need to do is to think more broadly about a healthy and health-creating society. We need to embed this work in our communities and not just in our health services.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll ask you some questions, complementary questions later on.
Yeah.
And in a way, I forgot to mention Benny. He's not here in the panel, but because we have asked Benny Marcel to actually say a couple of words as the final comments. So then we continue with Elvira. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Do you hear me? Yes. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Elvira Brattico. I'm a professor of neuroscience, music and aesthetics, and I'm one of the leaders of the Center for Music in the Brain at the University of Aarhus. And this is placed in a Faculty of Health, this particular center. And we also are affiliated with the conservatory in Aarhus. So we are kind of a special place where we combine science and arts and music. And we are Center of Excellence of the Danish National Research Foundation. We started in June 2015 with really large funding amounting to about 7 million euros, which allows us to, of course, recruit talented researchers from around the world and students, and also to conduct studies using neuroimaging methodologies, which are actually quite expensive, such as fMRI or MAG and EEG. So we are a center concentrated on music, and understanding the mechanism, how music can actually help us and benefit our lives and our well-being, and also both in education for the maturing children, so to help them develop as civilized persons in adult life, and also in the patient. So we are studying also some special populations. So this is just my general profile, but I've been asked to actually address some of the issues which might actually help and fluidify somehow the relationship between us researchers and also the practitioners in the field of culture and health. And I've thought much about it, and there are several, of course, problems in this kind of relationship, which are could be actually maybe summarized in some C's. I've identified some C words that could be used as a sort of a memorandum for us. And I think the first C word would be like confess. So we need to confess and to be aware that we have a problem in healthcare, in the way that medical sciences are dealing with people and how we are actually curing and taking care of people. And of course, we need also to accumulate another C word, to accumulate evidence. And we are accumulating evidence in, for example, music therapy and in the music intervention studies. I've counted there are up to 15 meta-analyses, which include tens of studies with really lots of subjects. So the evidence is really growing for the scientific evidence, objective evidence for the effects of, for example, music, but also other arts and dance and so on. on well-being. And so I've already used all my time, but I think that the important C word is change. So we need to change the way we think about healthcare, and we use lots of concepts and words which are actually from the natural sciences and from our modern society. And I like very much the idea of cultural well-being that was proposed by one of the previous speakers, and including in well-being also the concept of happiness, eudaimonia, so the human being as a holistic and cultural person. Yes. I stop here.
Let's be happy. Thank you very much for those words. Can you please?
Yes, my name is Erik Sandøy. I'm the CEO and founder of Aleris Care in Norway. We are the greatest, maybe not the greatest, but the biggest private care provider, and we have the public authorities as our clients. I think that society has a great challenge in health and care. And culture has a lot of resources in our society. This makes a huge potential to make solutions and changes. We have decided to use music therapy in our work. It's a really new profession in Norway. We have been doing this for about 10 to 15 years. And we see that music therapy are now implemented in standards of treatment in several diseases and psychiatric conditions. I think that it's very important to identify the window of opportunities when we're going to use culture and music opportunities. I think traditional treatment has shown us a limitation. I think that we are often working against the illness in people and what we're going to treat, but I think with culture and with music therapy we can stimulate the fresh parts and the good parts in people. Music therapy has an intention to patient participation. It has contemporary efforts, knowledge, and results from neuroscience. It has attention to cross-sectional results, and it has documented cost reductions. I think it's very important to think implementation in doing this work, to identify organization, for example, like Aleris, has the field knowledge and the competence and is willing to take the risk to do this in developing these services. I think establishing cooperation with university and research institutes are very important to support results and the experience from the practice. The cross-sectional cooperation that collect experience from other areas to support our own practice is very important. And investing in these cross-sectional working groups. We have in Norway several examples of that. We have something called Polyphone. It's a cooperation in the Western Norway that's working very well. Implementing music therapy in care institution areas are well documented now in Norway. And I think it's important also to investigate the municipal plans and identify areas of interest in music therapy. We decided to do this in our treatment programs, and I think we had a great success and advantage with doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the next.
First så tar jag sist.
Yes.
Right.
Please.
So my name is Max Liljefors. I'm an art historian from Lund University. I agree with all the things the previous speakers have said. I will not repeat anything of it, but I want to add one thing. We have seen today that there is an abundance of data about the health benefits of culture and the arts. But it has also been implied that such information will be more fully appreciated by decision makers and perhaps the public if framed by an understanding of culture as a foundational part of what it is that make us human, whether you are ill or not. That is, a narrative of the human as, at her core, an aesthetic being. So looking forward, can we create such narratives? I think it can be good to remember that such narratives are actually part of our cultural heritage, our cultural history, very much. Already the Greeks described how you can actually learn to recognize beauty around you, and that this will fill your heart with joy and with attitudes of acceptance and gratitude. The Romans knew that a picture could help you to cope with traumatic loss, even in the face of death. Or as a British philosopher once said, in front of the artwork, we can be freed from self-concerned anxieties and open up through our bodily senses to the nourishment of existing. And I think that such insights about the very nature of the aesthetic experience can be interpreted and mediated in ways that make sense today, that would make sense here. That is, not only as historical documents, but as accounts of experiences that are universal, should belong to us all, and no one should be deprived of them. And perhaps then those insights can give further existential depth to our data and information and make them even more persuasive. And I think that humanities have a particular responsibility here, which we do not fully live up to yet, at least. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Gunnel Orselius-Dahl. I'm the chair of the Culture Committee in Stockholm County. And I'm very pleased to be here. It is a very interesting day. And as a politician, we have a lot of will. We know what we want to achieve, but we need the knowledge of experts to know how to do it. And sometimes it's that knowledge that makes us see what needs to be done. And that's what I really felt this day. As a liberal politician, I'm convinced on the value of healthcare of good quality with equal access for all, but also healthcare that uses its resources in the most efficient ways to reach that goal, the best possible health, the best possible outcome of care and treatments given. As liberals, we are also convinced of the value of culture in our own society, in our society in general, the intrinsic value of culture for its own sake, but also the value that culture can add to other sectors, not least health. Oh, I love the word creating health that mentioned today. Working as a teacher, I have seen severely ill children developing an ability of learning and growing with the help of different forms of culture. With that experience followed a great will of creating this possibility of prospering for other children. As liberals, we long had the conviction that culture is good for you in both a physical and psychological sense, and the evidence is mounting that we've been right. When you have a conviction and it is supported by facts or indications, your task as a politician is to act, and so did. With a mandate and support by our Commissioner Anna Starbrink for healthcare and culture, such a happy combination of portfolios, the Culture Committee and Office have been hard at work at realizing a more integrated, strategic and ambitious structure for health and culture that we now have accomplished. Such work leave a paper trail in budgets and yearly plans, but most of it is done in convincing, delivering, sharpening your arguments, making people see your perspective, the work of politicians. Did I say accomplished? Perhaps to a certain degree. The political decisions have been taken. We're a few steps on the road. I'm very proud of how far we have come in such an early stage of this type of healthcare. The real work, of course, begins now, making real our ambitions, testing our assumptions and indications, showing the world what culture can do for health. Sciences and professions time on stage.
Thank you very much for this first round of presentations and your views on how to go further. When working with this homepage that we have, the cultural brain, we have had the idea only to present data from journals, medical journals, good journals, and also leading universities in order to sort of have a safeguard, a platform, a very firm platform to stand on. And that has, in a way, been good for me to try to persuade the doctors, because they are used to read this type of literature. But do you think, I mean, you talked about languages, and you also, in a way, if I address you two, I mean, do we have to translate what we see in a better way? Do we need more data? Per Torgård said we have the data necessary. Are there some sort of data needed, you think, to persuade the politicians and authorities to go forward?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. One is that we probably need to translate the biomedical evidence that we already have into another more accessible language, because not everybody's used to, certainly in the public, general public isn't used to interpreting that kind of data. And secondly, I think we need more research that lends itself better to the kind of work that we're considering. So there's a very specific character to arts and health work that needs to come out more in the methods that we use. So that's why we argue for more qualitative, more mixed methods, more kind of observational studies that would make more sense for a very subjective experience like the cultural one.
And how about you, Elvira?
Yes, I agree with that, and I think that we still lack maybe some tools that could be used to address these new concepts or to define better these concepts. So what I was trying to say briefly is that there are some ways of describing the cultural human being, the person, the aesthetic being, as was mentioned before, that are maybe not really considered enough in the natural sciences, in medicine. And so we could try to find the right tools, maybe reductionist tools, questionnaires, or this kind of ways to assess and measure the broader aspects of well-being and eudaimonia, which I was introducing. So the concept of the well-lived life with meaning, because I think that some of the very crucial function of arts and culture is to provide meaning to life, to give dignity to the people, which is something that is kind of, I think, neglected in the medical science.
You're broadening, in a way, sort of the field, and that's good, because what I really appreciated with your report was that it's from the cradle to the end of life, which I think what we have to discuss, and I would like to discuss that with you, not only therapy, but also preventive. Yes. I mean, how can it be used in school, prevent, delay, onset on, etc., etc. But you mentioned all the meta-analysis that we have today. Christian Gold was here and mentioning, I mean, that it can be used for pain, for schizophrenia, for that and that and that. And we have kind of a situation where we know a lot, but we don't use it. I mean, Why don't we use it? Can you answer that question? I mean, you're using it, but why don't we use more of it, actually?
Well, I think, like I said, we have a tendency of seeing or solving problems in an old way, and we are not always that good to see the new possibilities like culture and music therapy. And I see in Aleris we have been using this for almost 15 years. We used it in the elderly care. We use it in care for adults and care for youths. And we see that we have made a lot of kind of practice experience on this that we can give to others. So I think a lot of this work is about doing the right thing in the practice, collecting examples that show that this works, and that we were so lucky to have Viggo Krüger that's been with us for all these years. He started as a care worker and ended up as a PhD in this field, and he has followed it all the way. And we see then, when we know about this, then we use it. And if you don't know about it, you don't use it. So I think it's not enough to have all this data. I think the environment has to be proactive, go out, almost sell itself out to the different environments.
So do you work like this, that you have you evaluate what you do and learn from that in the next step? So you evaluate the process, actually. Do you think that the, say, private sector can be leading in this way? You are more free to...
I think we are more free, and I think also that we sometimes dare to take some risks in this. And I think you have to try, and it's... for our part, we can also fail, and we can learn from the things that we have done. But when we have a strong belief in it, and we also have the people that can do it, then it makes results. And I see in Norway we have a growing environment of music therapists, for an example. Like we in Aleris, we have 9 of them, and we can see that it's now spreading out to other municipalities and to other activities in the society. So I think someone has to start, use it, and then it will spread.
But I mean, now we have been talking about therapy, but I would like to, the hedonistic thing, I think we'll leave to a little bit later. So we'll leave this room happy, singing, something like. But we haven't talked about prevention, actually. How do you use it in our school system? We know it's good for young children, and recently we have a publication talking about music for preterm infants, which is good for their brain development. So we are talking a little bit on the downside of our brain and not the upside. I mean, how can you start here? Because
you go first.
Okay,
this
time I go first.
Elvira, you start.
Yes, okay. Yes, definitely. I mean, this is really crucial. And the thing is that in order to implement this art and culture in the primary schools and even earlier, of course, we need politicians to believe in it and not to cut funds. And I feel that we are really in this kind of situation now that we have to justify our existence. I mean, why we have culture and art, which is kind of counterintuitive almost, because art has existed since actually Neanderthals, before Homo sapiens species. We have always had the drive to seek and to make art. So it's really part of our DNA. It's a part of our being humans. So to remove it from the education, from the children schooling, it's really would be a big loss. So we need to keep and fight to convince our politicians and not to do that. Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely,
Rebecca?
yeah. We're firmly trying to argue in favour of the preventative role of the arts and culture. At the moment, we don't have fantastic evidence in that area because it's quite hard to prove something that's not happening. You know, you're not getting ill. So we need large-scale studies with a control group in order to show that something's happening in the that prevention is actually working. And I mean, I think for me, the Creative Health report ends at the point at which everybody should be doing this. It should be community-wide. You know, it shouldn't just be in the health system. It should be much more integrated into a holistic way of life.
Can I just add a comment on this? I think that one of the C words that I identified as a slogan is confederate. So we need to actually try to enter the panels. Like, for example, at the European level, there are all these funding possibilities, Horizon, and all these important funding possibilities, which are very often led by people who are not really open-minded towards cultural and art interventions. So I've participated in many applications for large funding, and even if they get good grades by reviewers, they're actually not funded often. So the problem comes again maybe from the top down, so that we need people who are in the right places in order to actually provide money for this kind of very big longitudinal studies, which are really expensive.
Yeah. And the other way of doing it is from the ground up, so creating much more public demand for this kind of thing, because if everyone decides they want this, then the government has to.
Yes.
But somebody has to take the lead, of course, to do it.
Yeah.
But,
in a sense, I think that's what our National Strategic Centre is about. It's about creating public demand to some extent.
But there is also another aspect that I think often about, and that is that some of these interventions or that you have with music, dance, etc., have effect on social skills and on empathy, etc., etc. So it's not only the cognitive functions or the maturation of the brain, but also how we relate to one another, actually. That has also been measured. And then I think about narrative, because we had Mary Helen Imordino-Young, which is sort of part of our international board, and she talked about narrative or storytelling and the importance of storytelling and the development of empathy. So empathy, you're born with probably a little bit different empathic skills, but nevertheless, it can also be developed. How do you think about narrative in that aspect, actually, that it has these type of effects?
Yeah. So my experience from working with bioscientists in one of the Linnaeus programs at Lund University, Brattico, which is about Parkinson's and Huntington's disease, and also working with art institutions, that there are already a lot of different narratives existing in different contexts. And my impression is that, we are talking about that there are already in place in society well-established, fine-grained infrastructures, the art and culture institutions, care institutions, but there are very few institutionalized bridges between them. I think a lot of benefits could come from with the small investments, so to speak, by creating such bridges where those different narratives, where we can learn each other's languages a little bit more and outline more clearly joint goals and strategies. Because my experience from these kinds of interdisciplinary collaborations is that it, to a large extent, especially when you're in the beginning of such a process, it depends very much on personal chemistry between the representatives, if you like, if from different areas. But if we could have kind of more recurring structural bridges between those existing infrastructures, I think it could be beneficial.
But when it comes back to let's say, time is running really fast now, but to the hedonistic, because when we talk about sort of cultural activities, I can see them having different effects. It can be Parkinson, it can be schizophrenia, it can be some very special sort of downhill of the brain, or that you're affecting. But it can also have this possibility of sort of closing the window for pain or for anxiety or what you regret something, etc., etc. And that is because it closes sort of those type of windows and open up to just hedonistic feelings, to be happy, to forget about everything. How do you look upon that in the context of usability in the society as a whole?
Yes, I think I can comment on this because I think it's not just hedonism, it's not just pleasurable feelings. It's I mean, there are studies which show that actually it's not only the negative feelings are diminished by, for example, writing narratives like stories, and so they impact on personal well-being in the sense that they actually allow coping resilience. So it's they don't remove completely. There could be effects such that the situation, that the problem is not completely removed, but the possibilities of the person to cope with it, to still manage, which was actually addressed by Anna in the beginning.
Yeah.
So yes, so it's really important not only like to measure, as I said, this depression or anxiety, but really the general situation of the person, how the person feels, how the life is enriched. Yeah.
So now a question to the politician. You have to represent the politicians, and that is this field too broad for you to deal with? I mean, do you want more specific things to sort of decide on that it's good with music for Parkinson or dance for Parkinson or music for that, rather than having this attitude of yours, I mean, from the cradle to the end of life? Is it too big? Do you want sort of certain examples to start with, and then you continue to broaden or to have cultural sort of things going into various types of activities in society?
I think we have so much experience right now, so we can go further. But I think it's very, very. The bridges between health and culture and social care and the society of its own, it's very important to get and accept and to get to that point that we can take a decision and go further and come further with real points to steps to go further with.
Yeah. I think these will be the sort of last words. And we can promise to provide you with as much sort of basic information as possible and reliable. So thanks very much. And now I give the word to Ben Marcel, being the director of
the Nordic Culture Fund.
Yes. Please.
Thank you. So, dear friends, the question in the end of this conference is how can we encourage decision makers to realize the full potential inherent in the intersection between culture and health. And first of all, I would like to thank the Stockholm County and the Center for Culture and Arts in Healthcare for an incredible, inspiring and informative day. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the moderators, Katarina Lindblad. Fantastic work you've done today. And Professor Emeritus Gunnar Bjursell. Your long-time work and important contribution to the field of culture and health has been crucial for what we have reached so far. So keep on your very important work, Gunnar.
Thank you.
This conference reflects the huge interest in the intersection between culture and health, an interest that requires political action as well as national and Nordic development strategies. Above all else, it is important that this intersection between the two is made more visible, including on the political agenda, just as it is here today in the county of Stockholm and some other places around the Nordic region. In 2016, official Nordic cooperation on public health adopted a declaration on reducing inequality in health through knowledge sharing, development projects, policy work, and the introduction of measures to promote good and equal health. To achieve this objective, it calls upon Nordic bodies to prioritize knowledge sharing and projects that revolve around preventative measures and health promotion. The Nordic Council of Ministers for Health and Social Affairs has also established a Nordic arena for cooperation on public health, with the Nordic Welfare Center as its secretariat. This arena has adopted a horizontal, intersectional approach to all its activities and works with existing working groups, networks, institutions, etc. at Nordic level. One example of this horizontal approach and of how other policy areas have had an impact on public health is the Nordic mapping project of culture and health conducted by the region Skåne. I know you are here today on behalf of the Nordic Council of Ministers. Positive involvement in the world around us has a range of benefits. It's enabled us to influence and shape our lives and has an enormous impact on our health. Enhancing participation in social life is not only one of the most important national objectives for public health, but it is also tightly interwoven with the cultural objectives of ensuring wider participation in increasing the accessibility of cultural life. In short, change is in the air, and our main objectives here today has been to emphasize the power of culture. Its potential to move and inspire people is good for the individual and for society as a whole. Society needs a flourishing cultural life. The health-promoting and therapeutic aspects of culture must be clearly reflected in policy objectives that ensures accessibility to all, so that individuals are able both to empower themselves and improve society. So if I were asked to say in brief what needs done to make further progress at the intersection between culture and health, I would most likely to refer to Anna Starbrink's speech earlier today. First of all, the importance of working together on these issues and keeping each other up to date is undiminished, particularly when it comes to making each other aware of new developments. The culture and health perspective also needs to be incorporated into political strategies at local, regional, and national level. The question must not be reduced to mere window dressing, or to use Anna's excellent turn of phrase. I heard her saying social ministers need to think like culture ministers. As well as promoting great visibility and recognition, it is important that we continue to earmark the time and money needed to identify strategies that will continue to drive progress. In my opinion, there is much to be gained from putting the issue of culture and health on the Nordic agenda. My hope is that the follow-up to this important conference will focus on the political decision makers at various levels at the Nordic region. And this follow-up work must be based on the experience discussed here today and the conclusion reached. And I foresee Stockholm County Council and other stakeholders playing an important role in that process too. Today's conference, under the umbrella of the Swedish presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers 2018, is an important step and a rather unique meeting, making this question of the intersection between culture and health more visible, and recognizing it is very important. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Benny, and thank you, the entire panel, and thank you giving us all this day. It's Friday afternoon, and just bear with us 2 more minutes, because the host of this entire day has been the Kompetenscentrum of Culture and Health, and its boss, Eva Bergqvist, is now going to say the final words.
I like that word. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you all the speakers. We're so humbled, happy, inspired by the talks and the panel discussions. So proud and so immensely happy that all of you came here today and participated, sharing stories and networking, making this something we all want to work with and develop further. But I would also like to thank some other participants here today. We've had a wonderful choir, wonderful dancers. They're not here anymore, but this is a profound thank you to the artists. We have had Teide and students from the Karolinska Institute who have helped us with practicalities. Thank you very much. And last but not least yet, I would also like to thank my co-workers, Haris Agic, Ulrika Lindblad, Katarina Wikström, for tremendous work. You've pulled this off in a couple of months. It's been hard work, but we're very thankful. And again, Katarina, you've guided us with insights very wisely and curiously through the day, sometimes firmly. I think that was needed. And with a very good result, I say. We're only five minutes left, but thank you so much for your input today. Thank you so much.